All right, I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen for Monday, August 16th to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So the first order of business this evening is to receive a presentation from Zen City. And it's an exciting new product that helps us with community engagement. So looking forward to that. And we have our presenter with us this evening. Ellie, are you there? This is Jamie Stevenson. This is Jamie Stevenson.
Hi Jamie, this is Jonathan from Zen City.
Hello Jonathan, how are you?
Very good. Was this the right number for me to call?
This is the right number. Kate, I might need your assistance if Ellie's on a different line. We might need to conference her in. Is Ellie joining also, Jonathan?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
but on a different phone number.
Okay.
As in, she'll be dialing from her phone.
She can't get the
There we
computer
go.
to find the internet.
Ellie? No,
I-
you have to answer.
I'm trying to.
Okay, there.
Okay, that worked really well. Okay, do we have both of you now?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, Jonathan. Ellie, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm not sure what happened. My apologies.
That's okay. I couldn't get the internet working in this meeting room, so you're gonna have to, we all have the printed copies. So if you would run them through the presentation.
And if you wouldn't mind to just please introduce yourselves as you get started. We're happy that you're here with us this evening.
Thank you, Rich. Sorry, I just can't see any faces. Should we start now or in a couple of minutes' time? When would you
Yes.
like us to
Yes, we
start
are.
conversations?
We're ready for your presentation, Jonathan.
Fantastic. Wonderful. So firstly, thank you. I'm looking at my screen, myself on the screen here. So firstly, thank you, Town Administrator and Board of Selectmen, for taking the opportunity to hear our presentation today. It's a very quick introduction. My name is Jonathan Schaefer. I oversee town partnerships here at Zen City. I am joined today by my colleague, Ellie Epstein. And once again, thank you for the opportunity to present. For the next 15 minutes or so, we will be sharing a little bit about Zen City, what it is that we do, how it is that we partner with towns and counties, towns and cities, and also dive into a few case studies that we do for the state of Connecticut and how we look to partner with the town of Darien moving forward. Of course, we're all friends here, so please feel free. We like to keep this as conversational as possible. So if you have any questions, I probably can't see your hands raised, so please feel free to ask questions as we go through, or we'll also leave some time towards the end for any Q&A and go from there. How does that sound for everybody in the room?
That's great, Jonathan. Thank you. We will hold our questions till you're done presenting.
Sure. I might every now and then call out what slide we're on, just so that we're all on the same page. So I'll refer, I have the packet in front of us, so I assume that the Zen City deck starts on slide or page 3. So if I say page 3, that will probably be the very first page of the presentation.
We have the presentation deck in front of us. Our pages are not numbered like yours are, but we'll follow you.
Sure. Excellent. Thank you very much. So to briefly share, Zen City is a government-exclusive software vendor. We exclusively partner with just towns, cities, counties, and state agencies to allow senior leadership within towns to better connect with their quiet majority resident base. That is our primary mission. And the reason why we say this is because we often see that there's a few voices that tend to arise to the top, and and it can be very helpful for cities and towns. But one of our primary goals is actually to help you connect and better engage with residents who might not necessarily have the availability or the ability to constantly share their feedback about what's going on within their town and how they would like to see the needs and preferences accordingly. Just to share, I always like to start with a quote, best to hear from people in your shoes more so than just the vendor. But so on the second slide there, Chris McMaster very much sums up why it is that we're here. The most important question that we've been trying to solve is how do we as a community better understand our quiet majority? And this is how this is how town administrators, CIOs, mayors, council, board of selectmen best leverage Zen City to understand what's going on within their community. Moving to the next slide. Today, Zen City partners with approximately 220 local governments across the US. Specifically within the great state of Connecticut, we're already partnering with towns like Guilford, Meriden, Stamford and Windsor, working directly with their senior leadership to achieve resident engagement goals. Moving a couple of slides forward. Beyond helping you tap and connect to your quiet majority resident base, other important strategic goals that we look to achieve is to better bridge the connection between council and community, understand what resolution items or what priorities that the quiet majority community want to see put forward, and also build that bridge between what's going on at the senior leadership level. Another key advantage, another key pillar as part of Zen City is to get ahead of resident feedback, is to understand ahead of time what it is that our residents care about, so we can be as proactive as possible within our town. And that really ties into the fourth one as well, as owning our narrative. Once we understand what our residents genuinely care about, we can start putting in the measures, putting the programs, the initiatives in place that will reflect our broader community. We'll go into a few examples in just a minute, but I'm sure you might be wondering, well, all right, that's all well and good, Jonathan, but how does Zen City actually work? How do we actually tap into that quiet majority resident base? So if we see the slide titled Zen City Solutions, this is a pretty good summary of how the Zen City actually works. Zen City will consolidate and collect all publicly available resident feedback that is taking place on channels and sources. And what we do with that is we present that in a live dashboard, which we'll showcase shortly in the following slide. And we'll break down resident feedback into all the different topics, projects, departments that make up a town, so that we can better understand what it is that our residents genuinely care about, what it is that is actually driving the conversation, and on the flip side, what might actually be a storm in the teacup. We might deal with some things are huge priorities and some things are small priorities, and sometimes we figure out that it's completely the opposite. So we break down resident feedback into all the different topics and projects that make up a city and town, so we can quickly, concisely, coherently understand what our residents genuinely care about. On top of it, our technology also ascribes sentiment. So it's one thing to understand what our residents care about, what it is that they talk about. There's another item to understand how they feel about what's going on in our community, how they feel about the topic at hand, how they feel about going back to school, how they feel about a mask mandate. So showcasing not just what residents are talking about, but how they feel is mission critical to helping senior leadership best connect with that quiet majority resident base. Now, as we go through some of these examples and case studies, one of the, on the flip side of that is presenting and showcasing resident feedback, resident data that's publicly available is a good start. But what does the board of selectmen, what does the council do with this once we know? City team on top of this will produce reports for you on the issues that you care about, whether it be about a mobility project, whether it be about an education project, whether it be about how to spend the American Rescue Plan Act spending. So we can actually, our data team will on a frequent basis write up reports for you that summarizes the resident feedback so that we know crystal clear how residents feel and what they want to see us prioritize. Now, I'm going to go into a few different examples, and a lot of them are going to be based out of the towns and cities that we work with in Connecticut. So maybe if we, I'm not too sure exactly what slide this would be, but let's maybe skip to the slide that says Zen City's solution, create your own project / topics. It should be about the 8th or 9th slide of the deck.
Yep, we've got it here.
Fantastic. Zen City allows the Board of Selectmen, the town administrator, to create their own projects and their own topics that they're interested in. If they want to understand publicly available discourse on things, on projects and programs that you're purchasing, that is just the click of a couple of buttons. If you want to understand how residents are feeling about the Delta variant and how that's spreading and how that might impact the economy or how that might impact school teachers, et cetera, we can create projects for you within a matter of minutes. How residents might want to see the town of Darien prioritize certain programs within the ARPA and get more granular feedback. This is also widely possible. How residents might want to see downtown redevelopments take shape, and transportation, waste infrastructure, affordable housing, how they want to see some certain budget initiatives take place. This is all available at the click of a few buttons as part of Zen City. Now, I'm going to go into a few different case studies as we go through the custom insight. But as we go through, I would love to emphasize that Zen City is a partner. So what do I mean by that? So for every town and city that we partner, we do all the homework for you. We set up the Zen City dashboard, we write the reports for you, all written by governments. Let's just say get people that love local government, people who come from urban planning backgrounds or anything in that regard. And so we've designed our whole product dashboard, our whole infrastructure, our whole way that we break down resident feedback in a method, in a system that is designed for local government officials to comprehend and best understand. So I'll maybe take an example, if that makes sense. Maybe we'll start with the customized insights overview. So on about a monthly basis, once a month, once every 2 months, however frequently that you guys would need something, the Zen City team will go away and write a report for you on an issue that is most pressing for the Board of Selectmen or for the town administrator. 1 week it can be which program is going to help our residents curb vaccine hesitancy. It could be how residents might feel about public safety in general. And we will go away and write up that analysis, a 2-page report, and we will probably tie it to some resolution item, some meeting that you might have, so that we're going to give you the best bang for your buck, if that makes sense, in terms of your analysis. Having analysis and sitting on the shelf is not good enough for Zen City. We want to make sure that we're getting you the information in your hands on something that you guys personally care about. The next slide is a great example for a city that we did a lot of work with just recently around the Delta variant. So the title of the slide should say Customizing COVID-19. The city management, they wanted to best understand, not just, okay, Delta is spreading like wildfire here, but more importantly, what are our residents genuinely concerned about? If we're going to start, enforcing certain mandates and certain restrictions, what are the main concerns that our residents are having that we should take into consideration? Obviously, the city management, the council, they knew what maybe the local few probably had to say and what that was taking place, but they didn't really understand what that remaining 55,000 residents actually had to say about what was going on and about all the changes that were taking place as a result of the Delta variant. So we presented to city management that actually residents were mostly concerned about how shutting down some parts of the local economy would have an effect on the economy, and if a spike in cases and what the relationship was to vaccinated versus unvaccinated. And also there was just concern that because of the lack of communication that there was some accusations of fear-mongering. And so presenting that these were the three main concerns by their quiet majority residents about what was actually taking place in their personal city about the spread of the Delta variant, it was very important for the Board of Commission to actually understand what things do they need to emphasize in their messaging, what things do they needed to be talking about publicly, so that they can stay one step ahead of the narrative, and also reassure their public that they're taking all the precautions that they can to look after the concerns of their quiet majority residents. Of course, we run insights like this all day long right now, particularly around about like mask mandates for health employees, whether it be about return to school, as we'll see in later slides. It really just depends on what is important to the town of Darien, and the Zen City team will prepare an insight accordingly. Moving forward, if we can skip maybe just 2 slides, and we probably have a good example about ARPA spending. This is a much bigger city than the town of Darien, but I certainly hope the Board of Selectmen, you might appreciate this particular example. This city, which is, I'll share the city of New Orleans, they received a large relief package for ARPA, and they didn't know exactly what they should be prioritising, what the broader resident base had to say. So the mayor, the communications team, a few commissioners, they leveraged the Zen City platform to best understand what their residents were talking about, what their residents cared about, and what their residents wanted to see prioritised part of Zen City, as part of the ARPA spending. And we were able to identify for them that there were 4 major requests by their residents of how they wanted to spend the $375 million. More support for struggling businesses, more investment into city infrastructure, more access and more support for affordable housing and housing security, and of course, more investment within the city's public safety infrastructure. This is eye-opening for the city because prior to this, they were focusing on maybe 1 or 2 of those particular initiatives, but they're also talking about things like broadband, other things that weren't necessarily going to impact the larger resident base. And we were able to identify that these 4 initiatives were the 4 ones that were being talked about most by their residents. So even if the city of New Orleans, they wanted to go down a different pathway, they knew the 4 things they needed to at least bring to the table and discuss openly about, so that it would to best adhere to resident feedback and resident opinion. And we do have plenty more examples to go through, but I thought I'd pause here just for a moment. If anyone has any questions, if this is, and we can navigate from there.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll turn it to my board for specific questions right now. So, board member Sarah Newman has a question.
Where do you get your sources of information? Are they social media? Is it, where are you getting this information?
Sure. Great question, and my mistake for not explaining that at the very beginning. So we tap into anything that's publicly available that is within the rules of Darien. So we look at local media, so news websites, news editorials, comments on articles, et cetera, but we also leverage city-owned sources, so town hall meeting minutes, chatbots on your website, 311 if you might have. But I'd say that the vast majority of resident discourse takes place on social media, which we also incorporate. So we look at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it, to help understand that publicly available resident feedback as to what's going on. I do have a follow-up answer to that, but does that, Board of Selectmen, does that answer the question before I drill down a little bit further?
Yes, it does, thank you.
Yeah. We also look at it from a two-way perspective. So we look at both the town's channels, which is anything that the town owns, touches and feels today. So this will be your 311, your chatbot on your website, the town's Facebook, the town's Instagram, the town's Twitter. But more importantly, we actually tap into channels and pages and sources that aren't owned by the city or aren't owned by the town. And this gives us a much more fundamental view as to what residents are actually talking about and what it is that they care about. Because this is where they're finding their favourite journalists, their favourite pages, their favourite groups, where they're discussing things that are impactful for the city, but it's not necessarily addressed to the town itself. Or as I like to say, what people are saying when we're not in the room. So this really gives us a much more fundamental view as to what residents care about and what residents discuss on a day-to-day basis. And I will emphasize as well that it's all publicly available discourse.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I have a question.
Yes.
Excellent question, though.
Monica McNally has a question for you.
Hi, Jonathan. I'm happy to tell you that I called around, and a lot of the other towns that I talked to really like your product. They did mention something to me that I hadn't considered, and that is, how do you get into the private Facebook groups? Have you cracked that code yet? Do you find that they are reluctant to invite you in, and so that information's not available to you?
That's a fantastic question. So when it comes to private Facebook groups, maybe if I can backtrack just a moment, and I'm blushing here hearing about the cities you may have spoken to, so thank you. We go live within a week of a signed agreement, and during that week, the Zen City team, our data analyst team, will find all the relevant channels that are publicly available: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, groups, pages, etc. And anything that is open and publicly available, we will automatically connect to. And during that week, we'll identify private groups, and we'll create a list for you, and we'll bring that to the table and say, look, we've identified that here are some certain groups that are private, that are not necessarily publicly available, and we can together sit down and see which ones we can approach together to incorporate as part of Zen City's dashboard, and which ones we can just ignore because we know that it might be it might be a bit of a bridge too far. Now, based on experience, certain groups will always happily let us in, like short-term rentals of Darien, the book club readers of Darien, as an example, mum and pop's, best cuisines in town, as an example. So anything that's like warm and friendly towards the town. It's more of those groups that you might know one or two off the top of your head that is just a melting pot for not necessarily favorable discussion. And we just know well in advance, let's just not necessarily address them unless it's something that you wish to do. So we can either address it, reach out to them as Zen City, or we can reach out to them as the town and say, hey, this is what we're trying to achieve. Would you like us to connect? It really will depend on the nature of the group. Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no, but it really will depend on the nature of the group.
Thank you.
David. Selectman David Martin has some questions for you.
Hey, Jonathan. My first question, all of my questions go to the quality of the summary that you put together and the opinion that might be formed from the summary. All depends upon the quality of the data that flows into the program, right? So my first question to address that would be, how do you determine the quality of an observation that you sweep off the internet versus just a random thing? And I'll give you a silly example. We have a project,
Sure.
we had a project here in town, was related to one of the town beaches. And how do I tell if the data observation that you sweep says something like, went to Pear Tree Beach, the quality of the concessions were awful, I don't know why they got this new vendor, which is something very specific to a change that was just made to a service that's offered in town, versus, I went to Pear Tree Beach and my son saw a horseshoe crab today. How do I differentiate, when you sweep, I think of you sweeping the internet, sweeping any reference or mention to Pear Tree Beach all in together into the pool, and you come up with 482 observations that reference Pear Tree Beach. How do I discern how many of those 482 actually pertain to anything that's material versus, oh, I went to the beach today?
Correct. So that's a good point, and a good question. So allow me to potentially back up for a second. We don't rely on keywords, which is very important to our technological setup, because it could be Pear Tree Beach, it could just be any time someone mentions the word Darien, and that wouldn't be any useful information to anyone. There could be 50 towns, there could be a Darien in every single state, or there could be a Pear Tree Beach in 12 different countries. And so by only relying on keywords, we'd be pulling a lot of irrelevant, non-helpful information and showcasing that. So rather than relying on keywords, what we do is we look at the source material itself. We look at the article, we look at the page, we look at the journalist, et cetera, et cetera. And based on a combination of the content of the article and the content of the poster's discourse, we will automatically break that down into whether it's a conversation about a beach, whether it's a conversation about sanitation, whether it's a conversation about litter or city beautification, whatever it might be. So we wouldn't necessarily be taking Pear Tree Beach we'd be referencing that as the location, but we wouldn't necessarily be just pulling information that way. We'd be actually breaking it down based on what people are talking about in relation to the post itself. And so that would be the primary mechanism involved. And most importantly as well is because we're only looking at localized sources, we'd only really be looking at what your residents have to say about the issues at hand. If it helps, I'm not too sure if this part answers the question, but from a sentiment perspective, we would basically look at not just what people are posting, but the choice language, which is all automatically done, and based on the range of certain words and the negative connotation, it can be ascribed a positive or neutral or negative value as well. And so not only would it be breaking it down into the relevant criteria of the relevant topic, but also the genuine sense of how people feel. Once again, I'm not too sure if I answered the question.
That's directionally accurate, but you bring up the next question. Are there human beings that are making those observations, or is it the AI that's been pre-programmed to make that observation?
The AI will automatically break it down into the topics and projects and sentiment as well. Having said that, some town leaderships from now on, every now and then change certain parts of the sentiment. If there's certain expressions or slang that are familiar to Darien that is not necessarily familiar elsewhere, you can change the characterization of the sentiment, and that's part of the service as well.
I noticed in some of the examples that the number of observations was quite small. So in some of the examples, for example, there were 400 observations, and I'm thinking to myself,
yes.
Darien is not a big town relatively, but 400 observations in a town of 22,000 citizens wouldn't really fall into the statistically significant category for any meaningful analysis. So how do we ascertain that there are enough observations to reach a meaningful conclusion?
Excellent point. Just to share, if it would be helpful, if my eyesight is also a little bit, I might need my glasses, for the insights that the sample insights we provided, If we zoom in, there's usually a pretty finite time period. It might be 2 weeks, it might be 3 weeks, it might be 1 week. So it's literally capturing resident feedback over a very, very short period of time. Now, of course, if it's an important issue, we can track that 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, et cetera, et cetera. But based on the way that we write our insight and the request of the town leadership, usually if they're head of like a resolution item and they want to know what people are talking about in the 2 weeks or 4 weeks leading up to that resolution, usually from the prior town meeting, if that gives a better indication. And also just to share, the examples we provided were from towns and cities almost exclusively well under 50,000 residents, except for the New Orleans one, because that's my personal favorite.
I'm not sure that mathematically the time adjustment adjusts for the statistical significance of the lack of observations, but I'll move on. The focus of the sales pitch was identifying the view of the silent majority. So when you scour these observations from the internet and then you provide them to us in a summary opinion, how do we determine that they're from the silent majority and not from the handful of vocal minority people whose opinions we would already have anyway?
Thank you. That's another excellent point. I will start by, it's a funny expression that we have here at Zen City. It's called a troll patrol. So our technology is able to identify if the same poster is just constantly sharing an article on different platforms and different things. We will exclude that from the analysis. It'll only count as one, rather than the same person doing it 50 or 100 times. That's part one of the answer. So I'll put that to the side for a second. Part two of the answer is because you can separate and segregate the different sources, the different channels, the different pages, the different journalists, the different articles, by page, article by article, source by source. We can clearly identify if it's coming from one or two channels, and then we can say, listen, look, we're receiving 560 comments, but it's only coming from two channels, so therefore it might be, the same 90, 200 people going back and forth. Or we can also identify for you, there's a pretty even, pretty strong spread across 48 different channels that we've sourced this material from. And we can help identify essentially, how many voices that we'd typically be hearing from that issue.
Did that help, David?
I'm not too sure if that answered the question wholly, but does that give you a strong sense of how we help identify if it's almost going back with the same few people or if it's spread out over many more sources?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah. If it helps.
Selectman
Just
Kip.
add on top of that.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Jonathan. Selectman
Okay,
Kip
great.
Coons has a question.
Jonathan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Is it correct to say that the silent majority in your thesis is found on social media?
We leave, the short answer, yes, 80% true. But I'd say long answer is that we leave no stone unturned to help reach as many residents within your community as possible. This is why we tap into local media as well, news articles, community message boards, 311, town hall meeting minutes. We want to leave no stone unturned to ensure that we're actually trying to reach as many residents as possible about issues and circumstances that are taking place within your community.
Thank you.
And just to share, every town does look a little bit different. So when we do go live, sometimes we see a lot of discourse on Facebook, sometimes we see it a lot on news websites, sometimes we see it on the town Twitter page. Every town has its own little culture and it's a little bit different, but that's why our goal is just to leave those stone unturned to help achieve that goal.
Any other questions at this time? Nope. Okay, Jonathan, there's no more questions from the board. Would you like to wrap up your presentation?
Sure. I mean, I can speak. I can speak for another 2 hours, but
No.
I recognise it's probably 7:41 your time, so we can leave it at that if that makes sense.
I think that's great. This gives us a good basis for a discussion. We want to thank you very much for being with us this evening. We'll make sure that we get any additional questions back to you. And you'll be hearing from Kate and I in the near future.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Town Administrator and Board of Selectmen, and have a lovely evening.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. Thank you, Ellie.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. So we'll get to discussing that later on in our agenda. We'll move on to the first Selectman's report. I want to give you a COVID update. Cases as of today, there have been 56 cases since the beginning of July. All cases should be assumed to be the Delta variant. No other information on other variants has been provided through our local health department. Regarding breakthrough cases, not including today's cases because they came in late this afternoon and we haven't had the chance to do the contact tracing yet. Of the 43 positive cases since July 1, 38 were successfully interviewed by our contact tracer. Of those 38, 23 reported having been fully vaccinated before their COVID diagnosis, which means 60% of those are breakthrough cases. 9 of those 38 are children under the age of 11 who would be ineligible for vaccine. So our experience here in Darien is that a significant number of the cases are breakthrough cases. In spite of the state of Connecticut continuing to message that breakthrough cases are not the norm. They seem to be the norm here. All 3 of the vaccines were indicated in the breakthrough cases, Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. Most cases have very mild symptoms, but most cases were symptomatic. To review again what the symptoms are for the Delta variant, they're the same as with the previous iteration: fever, joint pain, headache, congestion, fatigue, cough, sore throat, loss of smell and taste. We strongly recommend that if anyone has any of those symptoms, please go get tested. The good news is that we have not had any hospitalizations here in Darien so far, although we got some news today from, I believe, the school's health advisor that there have been 3 children hospitalized in the Stamford Hospital. None of those children are from the town of Darien, but that certainly is a concerning development. Vaccine prevalence for Darien, of those who are eligible, Darien has 87.5% have been fully vaccinated, 94.4% partially vaccinated. And remember, a significant number of Darien residents, about 4,500, are under the age of 12 and therefore not eligible for vaccine. While we do not believe we need to move yet to mandatory mask wearing in our local restaurants and businesses, cases are increasing statewide. We strongly recommend that people wear masks to protect yourself and others. Businesses are certainly welcome to make their own more stringent rules, and hopefully people will comply with those rules as they're stated. I want to talk a little bit about booster shots. The CDC recommends booster shots for certain conditions in people with compromised immune systems, not for the general public at this time, and only for those who have received either the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, not the Johnson & Johnson. Booster shots can be gotten at our local vaccine providers. There will be no local town-sponsored booster clinics until there's significant demand and until we can be guaranteed of appropriate vaccine supply. David Knopf, our health director, has issued a booster FAQ, has posted that on the town website. Flu clinics will be held this year in the month of October. They'll be by appointment only and held in the town hall gym. More PR about that will be coming out. Health experts have said to date that there is no issue getting both a COVID-19 vaccine and a flu shot at the same time, which is interesting. The town has hired another contact tracer to help us with that work. And Stamford and Norwalk hospitals have adequate capacity at this time. The governor's issued a couple of additional executive orders over the last week. He also has given latitude to local governments to impose more stringent mask-wearing mandates for local businesses. As I mentioned, we are not moving in that direction at this time, but we're certainly monitoring the situation day by day. Regarding the census, U.S. Census results are out. The state of Connecticut has increased its population by only 31,800 folks, mostly from Fairfield County. Fairfield County's experienced an increase of 40,590. Hartford and New Haven counties also saw small increases, but 5 counties saw decreases in population. Very interestingly, Fairfield County is the most diverse county in the state, with 61% of our population being white. Stamford, at a 10% increase in population, is now the second largest city behind the city of Bridgeport. Darienne's population increased by 4%, and that's very consistent amongst our peer towns in southwestern Connecticut. We've gone from 20,732 to 21,499, an increase of 767 residents. There will not be a primary election this September. September 14th is typically a primary election in a municipal year, but the municipal elections will be held on Tuesday, November 2nd. Kate? Nothing tonight. Great. Then we shall move on. Do we have any board liaison reports for this evening? Kip?
Basically in trouble with the superintendent. Friends with her, let's say. We are moving forward rapidly to complete all of the summer work at Oxridge. We're putting down asphalt next week in hopes that we'll have the school ready to go when when the teachers come back. It's been quite busy, and I'll be able to give you a full report when it's all done at the next meeting, but we are in good shape, I think, to meet our schedule, which has been quite tight this summer.
Great, hold on. David? Nothing? Sarah? Nothing? Okay, very good. We will move on. Kate, is there any public comment? We received a couple of emails relating to the Highland Farm matter that everybody has in their inboxes, but aside from that, anything else? Okay. One came in just before the meeting that everybody should have received. Okay, we'll move on to new business. Discuss and take action on a...
Jamie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Public comments here.
Oh, we have public comment from anybody here in the room this evening? Or are you here for agenda items?
Are you here for a specific item?
I
You're-
have something to say about Crimmins Road.
Sure, please come forward and identify yourself, please.
My name is Joseph Kane. I moved to 31 Crimmins this past October, so I've been there it's just about to be a year. Upon buying the house, I knew I lived in a flood zone. I was well aware of that fact. Went through, obviously, a pretty substantial storm and really changed my life entirely. I have a 10-week-old at the time, and I watched as literally my basement, 8 feet of water came in. This was not just river water, but we had 4 manholes on the street below, and I'm not talking 1 or 2 inches. The manhole covers were coming about a foot up from the pressure of the sewage coming out and spewing not only across my yard, but into my house. So I was told backflows would be a way to prevent the sewage, but when the manholes themselves are physically blowing open to the point that raw sewage is running through your home, changes things. So I'm a young kid. I'm in a tough position, and I'm just asking for any help you guys can give to at least guide me in the right direction, getting through FEMA. I know I'm one of the younger ones on the street, but this is no way for a resident to live. It's wrong, and it's unhealthy.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak for public comment? This is your chance. Okay. Then we will move on. Discuss and take action on a request by St. Luke's for their 5K run. Everybody has the details. November 7th from 11:30 to 12:30. Police have approved. Any questions, comments about this? We've approved this in the past. If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Kip moves. Monica seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Great, thank you. Discuss and take action on a request to adopt the WestCOG multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan update. We have, hi, are you Victoria?
Yes.
Please, come forward.
Victoria?
Yes.
Sure.
And introduce yourself.
No, you're okay. Thank you, everybody. I'm Victoria Vitri with SLR Consulting. We're the company that worked with WestCOG on the latest multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan. So just here to present the board with a few of the main highlights of the plan before it goes to a vote for adoption. So this is the fourth time that the town of Darien is adopting a natural hazard mitigation plan. The previous adoptions were in 2005, 2011, and 2016. It is typically a 5-year plan. So this is the third time that the town is part of a multi-jurisdiction plan. The plan itself contains several pieces. So there's the overall multi-jurisdictional plan, which addresses regional-wide hazards as well as regional-wide actions for all of the municipalities throughout the WestCOG region. There's also a Darien-specific annex, so those are actions and hazards and vulnerabilities specific to the town. There's several appendices that go along with the multi-jurisdiction plan. A lot of this is administrative information, meeting notes, a lot of background data that's been carried forward from several municipalities throughout the past iterations of the plan. There's also several fact sheets. A lot of these have to do with, for example, mitigation success stories, some specific natural hazards, whether it's precipitation events or flooding, and then also some other specific programs such as sustainable CT, which we address in the plan. And then this is the Darien specific appendices. One of the main ones is the Stapley table. So this is a breakdown of those hazard mitigation plan actions specific for the town. A lot of the actions that have been identified for this update really surround emergency response and community education and outreach, as well as several infrastructural improvements that the town has identified. A couple of the main points that we really like to make when presenting to our municipalities is that one, it's really important to maintain and adopt an updated plan. This keeps all municipalities eligible for FEMA funding, whether it's the latest, which is the BRIC program, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Community Program, or the HMGP funds, so the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program funds. Again, these are funds for infrastructural projects, outreach projects, and then typically for the update as well, the 5-year update. And then another point we like to address is that this is just a planning document, so it's no sort of mandate or anything like that. It's really just a guide for the municipality that has been developed by stakeholders as well as municipal staff to help kind of direct natural hazard mitigation plan projects and outreach. The plan itself has gone through several reviews, so it's gone through the municipality, the COG, as well. It's been released for public comment, and the latest has been to DEMIS as well as FEMA. So it's been reviewed by several folks. It's kind of now at the end stage, which is why we're here for adoption. Overall, I have 17 different actions for the municipality. I won't go through them all. They are all outlined. But there's several educational and several infrastructural, as well as a few additional planning for future studies, such as drainage basin studies, I believe, and working with deep and sustainable CT on a few objectives as well. So those are just kind of the highlighting points. If there's any questions, I can address those. Otherwise, it's before you folks tonight for adoption.
Thank you, Victoria. Questions from the board?
Victoria, who from the town reviews the Darien specific portion?
Yeah, so it was released by my colleague Noah and David Murphy, and it was sent to the COG, Nicole Sullivan, who then distributed it to the plant to the municipality. So I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head who reviewed it and provided comment, but it typically goes to those that attended the planning meeting, which I believe I hosted Darienne's planning meeting, right?
Yep.
Jamie, you were there.
Yep, it was a meeting that was open to the public.
Correct.
And there was substantive input given by our staff, Ed Gentile, Jeremy Ginsberg. I provided input to it.
Right. Yep, so it's typically provided to those folks that attended, and then it can be circulated beyond that, but yep, it's open to all for review and comment.
Did I understand your comment correctly, that if we don't have the plan in place, we become ineligible for the FEMA program?
Correct. Yep. So it's the hazard mitigation grant program, HMGP, and then the latest is BRIC. And I believe the HMGP is open at moment, and then letters of interest. Demis is accepting letters of interest, and then the BRIC application, which is the newest program, which is replacing the old HMP fund, will be open in the fall. So correct. Any municipality with a lapsed plan is ineligible for those funds. So it's certainly a selling point.
It's actually a good evening for you to be here and saying that, because one item on our agenda is to approve a FEMA grant.
I noticed that on the agenda, yes, I did.
Board questions?
I
Sarah.
have one, and I don't know if I'm going to aim the question at you or Victoria, and I'm not sure who the right person to answer is. I see the 17 action items. Let's say the town of Darien wanted to do something at a higher level, more stricter, more conservative with an item, or create a new item. Are we restricted from doing that because this is what we've agreed upon? No, we can still do additional measures.
I'll let you answer first.
Yep, it
Victoria.
does. So the plan itself does allow some flexibility. Once it goes to Demis and FEMA for review, and they've provided it back to us for certain comments, certain edits, you can develop an addendum. On an annual basis is typically what most municipalities do, and it is usually specifically for the actions. So you can say whether it's complete or it's no longer. Say you move a critical facility location or you do complete a project and things like that. So you can make certain changes. I'm going to say it's kind of on a finer scale. You don't want to make anything too radical, because then it's going to likely have to go through another process.
I would think more proactively, not
Right.
not limiting. Sorry.
Right, but there is some flexibility. We like to say kind of on an annual basis. Typically is when it should be reviewed by whoever would be the best staff in municipality, and then know any changes, and then issue an addendum then. But yeah, there is some flexibility.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Monica?
No
Kip?
questions.
No? I like how the report is laid out. It almost allows the municipality to use it as a scorecard or report card.
Mm-hmm.
And one recommendation that I would make to the future Board of Selectmen is to review this annually with staff. And, to pick a few of the items on here that you want to be the priority items, and make sure that things get accomplished before the next hazard mitigation plan. If you read back, you can see that we have made some progress on items, which is great. Always good to see progress, but sort of have to keep it in front of ourselves to keep it top of mind. Okay, any other questions for Victoria? No? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. If there are no other questions, then I will entertain a motion to approve the WestCOG multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan update for 2021 through 2026.
So moved.
Monica moves. May I have a second? Sarah seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, thank you very much. Victoria, I noticed on the resolution that it asks for a signature of the town clerk, so we'll have to get that for you tomorrow. Okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks. You're welcome to stay, or you're also welcome to leave. Okay, discuss guidelines for programming at Highland Farm. And I know that we have Pam Gary is here this evening, if we have questions for Pam. Kate, I don't know if you want to start us out here, or I'm happy to do that.
As I said in my memo, the special permit provides some broad guidance for what activities can take place at Highland Farm in terms of programming and special events, but we wanted to focus on programming. I would say you should be looking at those, that's the most you can do. And because some concerns were raised to us about intensity of use, types of use, we felt it was appropriate for the Board of Selectmen to discuss it so that you could give Parks and Rec guidance on how you wanted to see that field used, because you get the feedback from the residents, maybe you get the complaints, but it's not fair to Park and Rec to be operating without some guidance from this board as to what you feel should be happening up there. And I would say you can go in all sorts of areas. Do you want to talk about passive versus active? Do you want to talk about the age of the participants, limiting it to, certain age groups? Do you want to talk about how frequently, only on the weekends, or classes should be no more than an hour, or there should be always 30 minutes between? So there's a wide variety of things you can talk about and put into the guidance. You could say that there are certain activities you don't ever want to see there. But I think it's time that we give them some parameters within which they can work.
Mm-hmm. So I'll just make some sort of general high-level comments. One of the things that we're seeing, and Pam certainly understands, there's a lot of pressure from youth sports groups to get more space, more field space around town. And, just a little bit of history. When we decided to acquire Highland Farm, we stated that we did not want it to become an athletics facility. We talked about having soccer there up to U12 possibly, and Parks and Rec has been really generous in maintaining that property and programming that property for Parks and Rec programs, which is terrific. But we also want to be mindful that it's a beautiful, quiet space, and people like it because it can be used as a beautiful, quiet, open space. So we want to make sure that we leave room for that, for those kinds of non-structured, passive enjoyment of Highland Farm. So I think, for me, I think the challenge is trying to figure out how to accommodate the growth in all of these youth sports groups, youth soccer, youth football, all the other groups that are clamoring for field space, while preserving the passive nature of Highland Farm as we intended it. So, with that, I would love to open it up for thoughts, comments. We're not going to vote tonight, but really would love to hear your thoughts. And one other thing sort of came up for us, maybe came to a head, pun intended, when a porta-john was placed out on Highland Farm to accommodate some soccer programs. And I don't think it was placed in the right location as I reviewed the special permit. It was intended to be in the southwest corner of the parking lot, shielded by a shed that does not yet exist there, but certainly is allowed to be there on a temporary basis, on a seasonal basis. So it just made us think that, gosh, we're programming a space that is of such intensity that we have to now put a porta-john out on the parcel. So it just got us thinking that we should be having this conversation tonight.
Could I just get one clarification?
Yep.
There is the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted a resolution from February 5th, 2019. There's also the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted resolution from July 24th, 2018.
Yes.
They are largely the same, with a
Yep.
few minor changes.
Mhm.
So is it safe to assume that the February 5th, 2019 resolution is the governing document replacing the prior?
The second one amends the first one. There's some very specific things, some things were carried forward. I don't recall if they outlined everything that was carried forward in the second, the amended resolution, but there are things like, they shortened the amount of time that we have to have between program activities if the numbers were small enough.
The main change was really in
Special events.
Right. But largely, yes, to answer your question, David, yes.
Okay.
The 19 one is operative. What are your thoughts? How do you want to see the property used?
So, I guess the difficulty I have is that, it's been under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen, and it's more this open space. We've been focusing on this passive recreation. We don't even allow kids to fly kites. We've been very passive with passive recreation. But that seeing it turn into, 14 different kids' activities on a weekend, and with, soccer and football whistles, and it kind of is very different from the original intent, I think, of the space. Can you tell me, Pam, how many of these classes, for example, might fall on a Saturday? Would it look like Cherry Lawn, the kind of traffic?
We've only had one program so far.
Okay, so when you
That's
say
it.
current programs that run or suggested programs, which one is the one that's been running?
Park and Recreation has had a soccer camp
Okay,
program, and then youth soccer also used it on a very limited basis. But we've always been asked in the past, while we were going through the special application review, is what types of programs would we consider running there?
right.
And at the time, we did talk about taking some youth organizations off of our fields and letting those fields rest and move them. But it was never an intention for us to gobble up every single weekend, every single hour.
Okay.
Nor could we. We didn't have enough programs for that. But I think we looked at it like we were very anxious to allow some programming out there because it was such a beautiful property. And we were grooming the field to do that. So our guys have spent lots of money and time grooming the riding ring for an area for play. Not necessarily for organized sports, but for playing. You're able to fall and you won't get hurt. It's not rough terrain. So we always had the intention of whether it be Tai Chi or yoga or camps or, in a seasonal fashion to run out there. And we didn't get a single complaint about the program that we had there. It was the single complaint from my stand view, not from top administration, was the toilet. But other than that, there was no complaints about, if anything, it was just more people were so happy to utilize the beautiful piece of property. It was great viewing. The families love viewing the kids from the area that the riding rink has kind of like an elevated seating area. So in our eyes, we thought we were doing what the town wanted us to do.
So one second, Monica. So just to make sure that we understand that we're kind of talking about two different activities here. Completely concur that we are happy that Parks and Rec has programs to run at Highland Farm. The other activity is in your role as sort of a facilities manager, renting out that space, if you will, to outside organizations, not Parks and Recreation. I'm pretty sure that youth hockey, youth football, youth soccer could probably fill that field all day, every day. And I think that that's really the crux of the activity that we don't want Highland Farm to turn into, an athletics facility.
And maybe that's the fear, but that's not certainly what we've heard. So youth football came asking for their 3rd grade and 4th grade practice, 2 weeks, and that was all they needed.
Okay.
Youth soccer doesn't even need it in the fall. They only had an issue with wanting some field space in the spring. So it really was not a whole lot of request for the field. So
Okay.
that's where we thought that it was easier, with their lack of like wanting a ton of space, that it was right along the same guidelines of what we were doing. They were paying the town $5 per child for all the kids in the organization. That goes back to the town to help pay for maintenance of all the fields. And we just kind of threw that all in. These are the fields that we were maintaining. So that was, Highland was one of them.
So maybe one thing for us to consider is for those outside groups that want to basically use town land, maybe the Board of Selectmen should have a kind of a review role with that, because I would agree that maybe there's instances where it's so limited in scope that it's not a hardship, but it allows us to sort of keep our fingers on the pulse of, the intensity of activity in that space. And I did want to just say one other thing. There should never be a whistle that's blown on Highland Farm, whether it's soccer or football or anybody else. So there are things in the special permit that were in here intentionally so that we could be good neighbors to the Ox Ridge Riding Club, and that's certainly one of them. Monica.
Yeah, Pam, I'm just trying to figure out what's driving this conversation in the first place. And is it because there were a couple of groups that approached you and there is no space elsewhere for them?
Let's see, it's a two-part answer here. There was lots of discussion surrounding the use of Highland Farms as it was trying to become ready to, be used. And so, yes, there were lots of organizations that, I'd say youth soccer was the number one, because in the springtime they had some difficulty with the fields that they had, and their numbers had gotten large. And we as the Parks and Rec Department, were completely open to that because we felt that that was the vibe going on, that, it wasn't an excessive need. And so that was one thing. And then, of course, our programming, we were continually asked what types of things we would bring there. So we happily put lists together, whether it was passive or it was active. So from the beginning, I think that we just felt that we were anxious to get the start date, and as well as community events and some of our programming. So, and everything from some active and some passive. So I just feel there's just, as we said, we're looking for guidance, because if it's not something you want, we don't do it. But I think that there are a lot of residents are anxious to utilize it too. And we have a park monitor out there every partial during the week, and as much as the property is used, it's not heavily used. Even during summer, there's many trips out there where his reports are there's nobody there. And I was there today. I mean, there were 2 walkers. So our intent is not to gobble up every day. I think our intent is to let put some feet out there.
If I could also answer, when having a discussion about the porta potty, we then became aware of the request from football to have some practices there. And football was actually something that we had discussed early on, and then, when we were buying the property and talking about uses, it was something that was, and I'm thinking football pads and in the sleds and stuff, whoa, not a Highland Farm. So, became clear, Parks and Rec have not been involved in those discussions. And it's not fair for, me to say, oh, Kim, that's not something we ever intended, because she wasn't part of that. And, and I also didn't, I can tell you my vision, the sleds, that's not what they were talking about. So I think we need to kind of get everybody in the room and lay out what is acceptable, what feedback do you get from residents and from neighbors about what they want to see there, and what uses, demands is Parks and Rec getting that we would like to be able to put up there so that the property is well used.
Questions?
Pam, can I just double check, you're for the programming that you're referring to, we're referring specifically to the space that falls within what was the old riding rink that's been graded and prepared for use like that, right? So the remainder of the acreage would only be for effectively passive, open space,
Well, we wouldn't put anything-
non-programmed activities.
We wouldn't put anything active that we felt that someone could get hurt on a rough terrain anywhere else. Because it's been groomed to take a fall. But the other parcel, I certainly would say if we wanted to run Tai Chi out there, it didn't have to be in the riding ring. It could be anywhere out there. You're not at risk of falling for that.
So things like Tai Chi, yoga, other things like that are more likely to be smaller class sizes and quiet.
It could be anywhere on
Could
the
be
property.
in some other spot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Jamie, your comment about the whistle,
Mhm.
is that specific to this governing document, or that's?
Yes, it's part of the governing, no loud noises, it's right in there with fireworks and things like that.
For the horses, yeah.
It's for the horses. Any other questions on this issue?
I guess I had a question. The upper area, the walking paths, there seems to be some goose poop sometimes. We haven't really put that in the budget, and we have, suggestions to do. Can you explain to me what aerial yoga is, and how you would do aerial yoga?
Aerial?
Aerial.
Yeah, that's a Jamie Gore question.
Okay. Just, Tai Chi or yoga or other yoga classes, where would it be? If the upper or maybe lower are full of goose poop, like where do you put those?
Right, well, I think, number one, if the riding room wasn't being used, we most likely would put them there.
Okay.
But if there was something else there, the property certainly is large enough to have another small group somewhere in a little small area. And there isn't goose poop on the 16 acres, and we certainly need to address it. But what we were waiting to do is to see how much activity was there, which would drive them, away.
Okay.
So, when we look at Cherry Lawn, there's no longer any geese there because it's very busy.
Right.
And we didn't know how busy Highland would be when it opened, so there was no sense in spending all that money. So I think moving forward, we're gonna have that discussion about how much it's gonna cost and if it's needed.
Got it.
Well, and we also have to factor in, we can't have dogs off leash, so how do we manage that policy with our geese relief program is dogs off leash, so
Mhm.
it's a bit problematic.
They are trained, though, we might be able to
Yeah.
do an addendum on that somewhere.
Well, we'd have to
If you need
collaborate
it.
with the Hunt Club
Mhm,
on that,
right.
for sure. Any other comments or questions this evening? Again, we don't have to have a solution tonight, we just wanted to have the discussion, let everybody think about, what is the vision for the utilization of this beautiful property going forward. And we will put something before you for discussion on some policy guidance for Parks and Rec at our next meeting. Okay? Great, thank you very much, Pam. Okay, with your board approval, I'd like to change the agenda around a little bit because we have a bunch of guests here tonight. So I'd like to skip over item number 5 for a moment and move right to item number 6, discuss and take action on the request for a special appropriation for the town share of a FEMA grant. You got lots of backup information about this. Kate, is Mark here?
Yeah.
Hello, Mark. So Mark is our resident expert on FEMA grants and has been working with a number of residents in our community for over many years, but particularly from the July 9th storm, where the town of Darien had an extraordinary number of claims to the FEMA flood insurance program. So Mark, please come forward and maybe you'd like to talk about this grant opportunity in particular for 27 Crimmins.
Sure. First, I'll start off with this area of town was extremely hard hit in 2007. There was 3 floods that year. 2 of them were presidential disaster declarations. And that's the starting point for hazard mitigation. So once a disaster happens and they provide assistance either to municipalities and or individuals, they put a set aside to do future mitigation efforts for future storms to try to lessen the impact of future events. So we had worked in 2010 on an elevation and an acquisition back then on Cherry Streets, just for some knowledge for people who may or may not know. That was done through myself and my partner in crime back then, Andrea, who worked for zoning, and she was a grant writer. She had the task of writing the grant. I had the task of getting all the information out in the field. So for me, it was a different experience than this current one. We've applied for Crimmins Road twice prior to this. The owner at the time really wanted to elevate the home. There wasn't really the desire to move towards an acquisition. But through the process of doing this with our folks at FEMA and also the state of Connecticut Department of Emergency Management, Homeland Security, the priority seems to shift towards acquisition. So this current flood, I sent pictures of this house that morning to FEMA and to the state. And I said, where is this grant application? It's been sitting since November of 2019. And it went through the review stages. Every once in a while, we get a flurry of questions and other comments about, either or of the grant application. So miraculously, the Tuesday after that storm, I was told that the grant to acquire the property had been feasible. They didn't like to use the word award, I don't know why. And that the elevation would be challenging. So I'm a person that needs, English and common language. So I said, what is challenging? And they said, well, there's several hurdles if you want to elevate the property. And I said, I understand that, but what is the hurdle? Because I can't address it if you don't tell me. So to them, elevating the house would leave the garage at the elevation it was at, and there was no way to fix it. So it's a detached garage, and that would be future losses. So it didn't make it beneficial to FEMA to spend money to elevate a home that is going to continue to have damage down the road. So the good news is that the homeowner and myself have been told that they can move fairly quickly on this within a 60-day window, and that put it on tonight's agenda for you all. In a little bit lengthy terms, it's going to take a piece of property that's known to flood and has flooded, I think I said 9 times since 1979. It has cost the federal government, all of us taxpayers, a substantial amount of money over those period of time, and it's been several different homeowners that have lived there. And this is one piece of property that we could do what I consider the right thing and take someone out of harm's way and also provide public safety with the fact that it's one less home in town that we have to worry about evacuating residents should another storm occur, and we know that's going to happen. So I'm here to ask for the 25% share, and I hope that you'll support this project. We've worked for quite some time. I think it's been about 5 years in total, maybe 6, since we've started the first application. And I'll be glad to take any questions.
So, just listening to you talk, it gives a clear impression that FEMA is slow to move and sometimes hard to manage. So, it sounds to me like what you're saying is we have a window that's open right now. If we don't climb through the window now, we might not get it again. Is that a fair assessment?
That is a very accurate assessment. I will say, if you get bored and can't sleep, I just read a document that says exactly what you just said, and it's very recent. It was last year.
Excellent. The memorandum that we received did not include any cost estimates for demolishing of the property, no indication of whether there was asbestos on the property, and no indication of what the cost would be to turn it back over to a natural state, I guess you call it. Can you just give me a rough guess? I don't need-
Sure.
I don't need
No,
accurate.
I apologize for that because I thought I provided it, but
Well, there's a reference to closing costs, the other transaction costs. It
Sure.
mentions like appraisal and other transaction fees. It didn't specifically say that included those other elements.
so we originally budgeted around $35,000 for the demolition of the property or the buildings. And then we had a contingency for whatever items we may find, like asbestos. I'm hopeful, knowing that this property's been reconstructed over the decades so many times, that if there had been asbestos, it would have been remediated several times over, because we all know it's illegal to play with it and touch it and leave it there and all those kind of things. So we're hoping for the best benefit, that it's just the $35,000 to demolish the two structures.
That is included in the total of the grant.
Yep.
Yeah, Mark, you have a cushion of 38,400, and I'm just aware of what happened with Edgerton, so that money is not to be, will you be doing any kind of remediation, like taking down trees or any grading
No,
or any,
we can't.
nothing, none of that is included in this, correct?
The hardest part about the FEMA process is you can't harm nature. You can't work in wetlands. This is strictly to eliminate the buildings and a flagpole that's on the site. That's it. The number that we originally budgeted for almost 2 years ago in November was taken off the Holmes School house that was purchased alongside the building there, for those of you who remember it. And we increased that budget by a certain percentage every year. And when we applied for it, and I'm actually happy to report that we've actually had quotes now. We're moving along, even though this hasn't been discussed, but we have quotes for the structure. It's actually less than we had budgeted for to tear it down, both structures.
All right, Kate, just to make sure I understand, the memo references $669,100 for 100% of the project, and the aggregate acquisition cost is $637,000, which leaves a net of $38,400. The demolition is in the $38,400 or the acquisition number?
In the 38. The estimate for demolition removal is 30,000 with 3,000 for
Okay,
site.
so the other closing costs, appraisals and stuff, okay, got it, all right, sorry to be in there, just making sure it all matches and works out.
Yep, it's all in there.
Okay.
And back to your point, David, about the timeliness of this, this storm didn't trigger a presidential or a gubernatorial state declaration of any kind, presidential declaration. This grant is leveraging a presidential declaration that was issued in May of 2018 for the tornadoes that went through about 6 towns in the Brookfield area. So that's why I think that program is going to be closing out sometime soon.
Yes, and there's actually an opening for another one based on last year's Isaiah, I can't even pronounce that name.
Yeah.
Easy.
August
yes.
storm,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
And we have to move, because it comes not just to you, but it has to go to the Board of Finance for appropriation and the RTM,
Yep.
which is why we moved so quickly to get it on your agenda so that we can hit the RTM in September.
No, that all makes complete sense, and since we have the next door neighbor with us tonight.
We have the owners.
You have the owners?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I didn't know you, so I apologize for not mentioning. Will there be any way that we can facilitate, prioritize, help the neighbors with regards to their FEMA applications?
So shortly after that storm, I met most of the owners that have been affected by flooding in town on July 9th. I won't say I've met every single person. There's people that just do not want to be publicly known or whatever. Some people don't like government to know things, so we've struggled trying to get as many people to come forward. But the ones that have reached out to me and I've reached out to them, we have about 7 people that are interested in this grant moving forward, many for elevation. I think nobody wants to really think about, having the property turned back into something else, but the reality is that elevations aren't easy to get. Many of these people have been told what I've told the public, which is there has to be substantial damage in the past. And unfortunately, some people don't even have flood insurance. And they live in the flood zone, and they're required to have it. For whatever reason, they terminate their policy or whatever. So we have 7 that I'm working with, and some are here. It's good to see you all. And I hope that in the future we can back them as much. You know, it's the best way I could sum it up is if you look at 100 people roughly got a hold of us through the July 9th storm, and of those 100 people, there's about a dozen whose houses have repetitively flooded over time, significantly enough to make a list that nobody wants their house to be on.
And is there any way, you know these other properties, and we have 7 that are interested in applying for either elevation or purchase. Is there any way to estimate potential timing or aggregate cost to help set the palette for what might be coming down the pike for us later?
So if it's an elevation, the homeowner has to pay the 25%.
Okay.
If it's for acquisition, you know, I could put those numbers together. I don't have them now. We're at the very beginning of the cusp of this the process of applying.
No, it sounds like you're being a guessing game anyway, because you have to.
But I can include that
You have to
in-
choose, which ones get approved by FEMA first. Second off, do they do an acquisition, or do they do the elevation? In which case, one has cost the town, one doesn't.
So
That's pretty tough to estimate at this point, right?
It is. It's really early for that. But I will say that FEMA and the state have said that if we can pool more candidates together, it shifts the cost benefit for FEMA.
Okay.
So maybe one person carries the other, so to speak. But it's very difficult. And I'll be honest with you, this is like the 4th time's the charm to actually get it. I don't know if I'm getting better at filling out the applications, or I've had some help with FEMA and the state offering a lot of help in the last go-round. But it's a difficult process, and I've advised every homeowner I've had a conversation with that it's a 2-year process.
Right.
You know, in '07, we had 3 floods, almost, it was April and October, and I want to say December, but that was '07. And I can't guarantee you that we won't go through that again, but I do know it's going to flood eventually. So we're going to do our work hardest to get this for them, and just as equally.
And I don't want to identify the property by address, but are you in touch with the owner of the property on the post road that is immediately across Stony Brook from the pumping station?
No. If you're talking about a post road address, no.
Okay, because I walked that property today.
Okay.
That retaining wall that is probably 20 feet from the foundation of that house is about to collapse. There's a visible section that is leaning out almost 6 inches.
You're talking about the one that's next door to the.
The one?
The opposite side of the
Yeah.
river.
No, it's on the same side as the sewer, on the same side as the pump station.
Yeah, it's on the same side as.
Same side, but opposite
Yeah.
the river.
The
Yes, on the other
retaining
side of the
wall
river.
that sits there is already compromised.
Yeah.
One section is already leaning out, and there are 3 or 4 other large fissures from the top of the wall to the bottom, some of which are like 4 inches in width, my estimate from across the creek, right? But, yeah, I don't know what we do with that, but I'm just thought I'd pass it on.
So I can say that, unfortunately, I've lived here too long, I guess, maybe, but some of these are private projects, and they're private property, and we have no jurisdiction to walk on their property. And so it makes it very difficult to work alongside someone when they're reluctant to begin with, mainly because of the cost associated with it. And you have to understand, some of these people have been aware of the projects, then they sell the property to someone who's unsuspecting and really doesn't know anything about it, may have had a home inspection, may not. It sounds like it's a cross between public works and a mitigation effort.
Yeah, I was mostly worried that once the wall collapses, it's gonna collapse into Stony Brook, right? And then it becomes a flood exacerbation issue,
Sure.
right? Because it will block the pathway underneath.
And that happened on July 9th, several places.
Yeah.
We had trees and porta-johns and everything else that contributed to
Okay.
increasing it. But some of these projects, not only do I solicit the public, private people, but we also solicit, the town departments every time we get these grants. So if, Public Works, for instance, or Park and Rec wants to try to improve something that is a benefit and will lessen future impacts, there is grant funding available for that. But I honestly have never spoken with that person this year, this storm.
And is there
There's a prior owner.
Is there, the town has done studies on the Stony Brook Basin, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Remediation. And other than the dredging that we did down here very recently, what else have we done? I guess I should ask that.
The dredging had nothing to do with flooding.
Yeah, so
It's sediment.
I can only speak about emergency management.
Yeah,
I can't
if
cover
you,
everything,
if you
but-
wouldn't mind, we're going to have Craig Flaherty and Ed Gentile here to talk to us about the watershed and the
Excellent.
flooding, so that's
Perfect.
not
Well,
the
And a
most
lot of those
urgent.
studies were done as a result of '07. That's all I do
Correct.
know. I
Great,
have an
let's
answer
defer
to
that then for that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thanks for
no problem.
Mark, I have one last question. Going back to Cherry, I'm just concerned leaving this property with driveway or concrete, and then in the future, people asking us, why didn't we take care of all of that right now? When the house was taken, on Cherry, was everything removed, including the driveway?
You
and-
can't leave any hard surfaces. So
Okay.
the patios, it's not just the structure.
Okay,
So it's
great.
the two structures, the patios, the front steps,
The
the
driveway?
sidewalks, the driveway.
Yeah, okay.
Gets returned to
But
its
everything that
natural
was
state.
built on, to my knowledge, is not in the flood zone or wetlands, so we won't have to deal with those issues that would go along with it, to my knowledge.
And that's all included in this number? Perfect.
Correct.
Great.
And it's to restore it back, much like we did to Cherry Street for anyone who's ever driven down Cherry and looked at that piece of property.
Super.
Other questions?
Well, that piece of property was the one that was all the way at the very end on the right-hand side, correct?
Correct.
So that's not demolished. And then the three properties right before that were the ones that were elevated under that?
Only one was elevated with FEMA funds. So part of the FEMA issue is you have to be a primary residence for yourself as a homeowner. Those two houses that were elevated as well were rentals, so the owner of the property took it upon themselves, much like a lot of the Bay Area residents did as well.
Yeah.
Most of our mitigation efforts have been done on a private funding basis. A lot of houses have come off of our repetitive loss list for the town, just based on that. So we've only done one elevation and one acquisition that I am aware of with FEMA grant money for hazard mitigation. And that's in the 30 years roughly that I'm aware of.
Sarah?
The only question, or extra statement, I don't know who manages the, putting the property back to the natural state. I'm not sure who would address this to, but I'm wondering if there's a possibility we can look at some other ways to maybe mitigate some other flooding in that area. I worry that this is a repetitive issue, and if there's anything that we can do with that piece of property.
So one of the
To help.
things that the FEMA grant also requires is that we can't do anything that will change or make it worse somewhere else. So,
Right.
So that's the crux of a lot of the project problems that we
Right.
face. So we can't fix the bridge on Renshaw, because if we do that, then more water's gonna get quicker downstream.
Right.
It affects everybody different. So there's a lot of, what's the best way to put it? A lot of goodwill, obviously, that we'd like to do, but there's so many restrictions on what we can do, so we can't actually do anything that will change it for someone else. So it really is limited to elimination and leaving it as open space. We can use it as, like, I hate to use the word passive recreation, but people can wander on it and adore it, if you will, but we can't build on it. and things like that. And some of the things you can put up there have to basically be something that can be damaged without any cost. So
Got it.
it leaves you with nothing, in my opinion, that you can put up.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I would just like to acknowledge that I think this is a heartbreaking decision for the homeowners and for the town. But after all the flooding events, it seems like it's the right choice of things to do for the safety of the homeowners and to really help eliminate, as Mark said before, you know, the fear of future flooding and emergency management and the safety of the family. So with that, I would like to entertain a motion. Kate gave us a new resolution acknowledging the correct grant program. So the resolution is that, excuse me, the Town of Darien Board of Selectmen approves the request for a special appropriation of $167,275 and recommends the same to the Board of Finance and further directs this resolution be forwarded to the representative town meeting for its consideration and approval. Be it further resolved that the Board of Selectmen encourages the Board of Finance to allocate the balance in the land acquisition fund of $39,066 towards the total needed to provide the required 25% local match under the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program.
So moved.
Thank you, Kip. May I have a second? David seconds. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Great, and I will look forward to all of us advocating to our RTM members to support this grant application. Okay. The homeowners, you guys want to say anything while you're here? No?
Well,
You've been through a lot.
I appreciate everything that you guys are doing for us, and hopefully this thing gets passed through everybody else. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for coming. Okay. So we have to, is the second piece of this action, Kate, to discuss and take action on a request for a report from Planning and Zoning Commission pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 8-24 for the
Yes.
possible acquisition of 27 Crimmins Road with potential FEMA grant money.
Yes.
This is just an administrative
Anytime we're
requirement.
thinking about acquiring property, they have to opine on it.
Mhm. So I'll entertain a motion for the mandatory referral. Sarah moves.
Second.
Monica seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Great, thank you. Okay, again, with your permission, I'd like to skip over item number 8 and move right on to old business, since Dr. Adley has been very patiently waiting.
Very patient, thank you.
We appreciate that. We're sorry for all your time. I know we had to lose Duke. But we want to discuss and take action on a request from the Board of Education to establish a building committee or committees for the 3 elementary schools, Hindley, Holmes, and Royal School. And you've been provided with all of the documentation, the ed specs, and I'd like to make a recommendation this evening that we form one building committee. And that one building committee has the responsibility of putting into effect the renovation projects for all 3 schools. You'll see that you have 3 resolutions in your packet. That's for state grant purposes, that they had to be separated, but each of those resolutions references the same individual building committee. Dr. Adley, I don't know if you'd like to make any comments this evening about the Board of Education's or administration's thoughts on one building committee versus 2, or anything else related to the resolution and the charge.
Thank you. First Selectman, members of the board, it's nice to be here. Thank you for your support of another educational project that is well needed. It's our thought that, well, first of all, as First Selectman rightly said, that the state requires that the building committee can be called the same, but it needs 3 separate resolutions just to state that you set up the building committee, you authorized me to submit application, and also the architect and the planning and drawings are done for the most part. So those are the main parts of the resolutions that need to be done. It's our thought that given the nature of this building project, they can be done concurrently, and also it would seem feasible from a cost expenditure point of view to do one building committee that can serve the three buildings, because in many cases we're dealing with many of the same issues. We can circle certain people in and out, ex officio as needed, but it seems most efficient, both of people's times and expertise, and just the scope of the project, to actually have one committee, and also be consistency within the buildings also.
Thank you. Anybody have questions for Dr. Adley while he's here? Kip?
Just one question I had on item number 8. Are there any concerns that the occupancy will not be permitted in the existing school, areas during construction? I haven't looked at the detailed plans, obviously, but.
No, we've looked at that, and I've looked at that. One school that was up for instance, Ox Ridge can take the DLC of Henley, which will open up the portables that come inside Henley. So we've done that preliminary look at can this actually work on the site. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've looked at that.
Okay. So it's feasible, okay? This is an ambitious program.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Any other questions for Dr. Adley?
Dr. Adley, I had one. So you have one building committee, but 3 schools, and you report to the state. So do you have an individual at each school that does the reporting, or does the building committee do the reporting and just do it on 3 different levels?
The construction manager does the reporting.
Okay.
That's the responsibility. For example, in the Oxford School, the final report goes to the state after Dr. Adley and other people sign off the required list. ONG, AP Industries, they're the ones that actually send the document to the state.
Okay.
I think we have a lot of good practice things to learn from the Ox Ridge Elementary School Building Committee that we will want to employ with this building committee. The one thing that I would just like to add, I don't think we need to codify it into the charge, but I would like to say under item B, the committee will select an architect, a construction manager, and other professionals as required and negotiate satisfactory fees. One thing that I'd like to recommend the committee consider, the future committee consider, is the hiring of an owner's rep. In the event that we need some additional experts who are advocates for the town, because these are 3 separate projects in administering that kind of a building project can be unwieldy. So certainly can talk to the construction manager to see if they have the ability to do that. But if not, then we've successfully used owner's reps in the past. There's really nothing in here beyond the select from the membership, vice chairman, chairman, and secretary, and include in its membership a member of the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and a member of the Board of Education, who shall be designated jointly by the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools. But beyond that, there's no other guidance about membership in the building committee. Kip, I don't know if you want to give us any of your wisdom tonight about who we want to consider and if we should be adding it here.
Well, with this type of project, it's a renovation, and a lot of the work has already been done. So it's not like we're going out creating a whole new structure, what's our design and all that. So it's less architectural involvement than it is better planning and systems development. With your 3 different schools and therefore your 3 different reports, but you do have to keep separate. There's a lot of paperwork, a lot of paper shuffling, and a lot of organizational work. If we can find some talent in the town that has good construction experience, that would be very helpful. We were very lucky in this past round. We had Rusty Schreiner, Sean Brown, and then Nick Ronco raised his hand, and that's his specialty. And he did it because his wife is a teacher there, and he likes the town and everything else, and he's done a great job for us. I think we're gonna need people who understand construction and following the data and the procedures and the paperwork is gonna be really critical here. I don't think we need as much design work. I don't know if you agree with me on that, Dr.
That's correct, yeah.
You're renovating within existing buildings, and it's really just sort of putting the finishing touches in it. But it's complicated because of all
Right.
your HVA systems,
Mhm.
HVAC systems and water systems and everything else, which can get tricky.
Okay, so construction and systems expertise, commercial
Will be
construction.
really
yeah.
important in
Yes.
this,
Okay.
in this group.
Okay,
And I recommend that you have your people who represent the students and the teachers and the parents, that they be ex officio members, because you're gonna have 3 different schools. I
Okay.
think that's the way it works.
Yep.
Rather than have them on the committee itself, it'd be too many voices, each one having their own special interests.
okay. So I guess what we first have to do is take action on whether we want to form one building committee as recommended, or if somebody has an opposing viewpoint on that.
I have a strong opinion that you should not form more than one building committee.
Okay. Okay. If there are no other questions about what's before us, then I can entertain a motion to establish a building committee for the Hindley, Holmes, and Royal Elementary School renovation projects. And that building committee will be called the 2021 Hindley, Holmes, Royal School Building Committee. Sarah moves. Second.
Yes, please. And good
Monica seconds. Any further discussion?
Are you voting 3 resolutions or each one separately? I think you
We
should
need to
do-
vote separately?
Yes,
I think
please.
you should,
Okay,
yeah.
so the first thing that I want to vote on is we're voting on forming one building committee. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. So the next vote will be to approve the charge of responsibilities for the Hindley Elementary School, 2021 Hindley Holmes Royal School Building Committee for Hindley School. Okay, I'll entertain a motion that Sarah moves. Did I hear you second, Kip? Kip? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay. For Holmes Elementary School, I'll entertain a motion to approve the charge of responsibilities with the same named building committee. Sarah moves. May I have a second? Second. Monica seconds. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And then for the Royal Elementary School, the charge of responsibilities for the building committee of the same name. Sarah moves. May I have a second? Second. Monica seconds. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay.
Thank you very, very much, everyone.
You're welcome.
Much appreciated, and thank you for Highland Farm for after the moving up ceremony came up. They came in
Oh,
very
you're
handy
welcome.
at the end of the year.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Adley. Appreciate all your time. All right, we'll go back up to the item number 5 of the agenda, and that is to discuss and take action on a request for an appropriation of $24,000 in ARPA funds for the acquisition of the Zen City software program. I'd really first like to hear from everybody their thoughts about the software program. Yes, please.
So I guess I have a few thoughts about it. It sounds interesting. I have a few thoughts. I'm wondering kind of where this request came from. Did they approach us? Was it something that we went and looked for? I think, as we're coming to this time where we have this IT steering committee that we're about to form, and the communications coordinator that the office will be hiring, and I would assume be interacting with the software at some point. I'm almost wondering if we should wait until the IT steering committee is formed and they've met, and what do they want to pursue? And I don't know if we need this beforehand. And I guess I also have a question on why are we using ARPA funds for it? So those are my questions.
Sure,
So
thank you.
It actually started with a seminar or webinar that I participated in on ARPA funds.
Got it,
And how to allocate them, how to spend them, et cetera.
got it.
And so the reason for moving now is because it is actually an eligible, hiring a consultant to help you assess how to spend the money is an eligible expenditure of the ARPA funds.
Got it,
So this would be eligible, and that's why we want to use the ARPA funds for it.
got it.
So to move now is trying to get us ready as we start discussing how to spend the ARPA money, to have access and insight into the things that we don't hear every day here in town hall.
I hear your point, though, on that, Sarah.
Yeah, I do.
Monica?
What I was thinking about is, I did call around on this, and the towns that I spoke to were very positive on this. My thinking is that we're going to form this committee, which is going to take some time, and this is a 1-year contract. So I am wondering if, I don't want to have the contract in place, 3 months before we even have a committee formed. So if we do approve this tonight, then I would ask for it to be held off a little bit until the committee is formed, so we're not wasting time. Does that make sense?
Understood, yep. What I would say is, does it have to be tonight? No. But remember, we have to go through the steps.
Right.
And as this is proposed, because it's ARPA funds, it's going to have to be approved by the RTM. So if not in September, it should happen in October.
Right.
Because they're not going to want to address it typically in
Exactly.
November or December, so.
Yeah, yeah. Which could work, that timing could work out well.
Yeah.
Well, we also have to really understand the timing, because from what I understand, as a non-entitlement unit, we don't have the same kinds of reporting responsibilities, so it gives us a little bit more time to get our plan in place. I know we have lots of time to actually spend the money. So I don't even know if it's reasonable to have a spending plan done by October. It may wait until the beginning of 2022.
Yeah, I think, our thought, I'm not, speaking for Jen a little bit here, the RTM wouldn't be asked to appropriate each individual tranche of the ARPA money. It would be appropriating the full amount, and the steering committee would decide on the allocation.
Right.
So, yeah, I think the only thing that we would try to bring to the RTM in October possibly is, please appropriate the full ARPA allotment.
So just from a process perspective, I envision that the steering committee will be formed, will go out and do all the necessary due diligence to determine community needs and bring back a recommended spending plan to the Board of Selectmen, which we would then approve and pass on to the Board of Finance and then ultimately the RTM, right?
I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think you have to go to the RTM with, we're gonna spend this much on infrastructure, this much on business support. You just go to them with, we're getting $6 million, appropriate the total. That's what I'm, but if you wanna go the other route, that's up to you.
Well, I actually think it probably won't be up to us, because I think the RTM will give us input on what level of approvals they want to give, I think. So, that will be our job in the next month to ascertain if they're willing to do that, to give a broad appropriation. I'm not sure, so
Yeah.
we can explore that.
I guess I'm looking at what's the minimum that's required.
Yep, understood.
Can we ask them if they would do a case study for us, meaning give them an issue or something related to town, to ask them to actually produce it for us, so we can actually see? It's nice that they put examples in the book, but can we see what an example would look like for the town? And the reason why I ask that is one of the projects that I was one of the two principals on at JP Morgan Asset Management, was selecting, evaluating, and implementing the research database and storage for both the equity group and the fixed income group. And we evaluated multiple providers for the project. And then when we got down to the last 2 providers, we asked them to each do a project for us to show us that they would be able to customize the project for us later. We don't have to ask them to customize this for us, but I'm saying, give us a better indication of what the end product is that we actually received that's specific to our town. It just seems like a good way to sort of test, will it really be useful? Because I may be the critical guy in the room, but sweeping the internet for all possible random observations related to an issue or a town, having the AI make some determinations that are pre-programmed as to whether it's a quality observation or not, and reaching any meaningful conclusion, I'm personally skeptical, and I'm really skeptical that they can identify that the data sources are people whose opinions we wouldn't have gotten anyway. So I personally am not convinced that the product actually does what it purports to do.
Okay, we can certainly ask them if they'd be willing to do that.
I think their expertise is in doing surveys more than just collecting data.
Yeah.
That was my understanding. And the survey could be very helpful with the timing of trying to figure out what to do with the money. So that would be where I would think their benefit would lie, more than just telling us what people are doing on Facebook.
Yeah, he didn't do a good job of explaining that part of the product, and I really like the idea of the surveys. It's arduous for us to put together surveys and to make sure that we get the right questions. So a tool like that in the process of making ARPA decisions, whether it's Zen City or some other provider, could be very helpful.
I think the surveying aspect of the product would be valuable. I'm not so sure about the other portion, because I like the idea of at least attempting to survey the town, right?
Yep.
To get as many opinions as possible that wouldn't otherwise be available to us.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And then the surveys can be targeted to more specific things,
Yeah.
right, that apply
Yep.
directly to town. So that aspect of the product would definitely be valuable.
Yeah, the towns that I spoke to, that is why they're re-upping.
Okay.
For the survey,
capability,
not for
because
the
doing it
social,
in town
yeah.
is brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Yep.
All right.
Any other thoughts? I'm going to make a recommendation.
Based on your comment,
Yep.
I'm willing to forego asking them to do a study if there's any time sensitivity related.
Yeah.
Because the survey portion, I do think is super valuable.
Yep.
And we are going to be having, plenty of things in town to survey the residents about over the coming year. If it's a 1-year contract and we can use the ARPA funds, it's not too onerous, right? We can always say, you know what, we didn't like the results we got. We're not going to do it next year.
Okay.
So if that helps, I'm
Yep.
not going to do that.
Kip, any thoughts?
Yeah, I was a skeptic about the site on Adjourn. It's only found on social media, but if they can do survey work,
Yep.
preparing a good survey is an expertise job anyway.
Yeah.
Well, let's do it, let's have them for that, because that'll be the right thing.
This will be 1 year to test them, right? Before the taxpayers are paying for it.
Kate, I think we should go back to them and ask them, give them the feedback that the Board of Selectmen appreciates the survey part of their product. And, if that changes the pricing in any way, I don't think it does, but
You want to wait till
I just
till we
wanna,
know? Yeah.
I just think I wanna wait.
We certainly had a very
So do you
eager.
want to table this?
Yes.
Till the next meeting or till
Yes.
September?
Next
Till we find
meeting.
out.
Next meeting.
Yeah, let's just, till the next meeting is fine.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay,
We had a very eager population who responded to the park survey a few years ago,
yep,
so that would be valuable.
okay. That was item number 5. We'll move to item number 8, discuss and take action on a proposal to form an ARPA grant fund steering committee. So, you were given a draft of my thoughts on an ARPA steering committee. The objective here again is that we get a small group of people who can go out and canvass the community, canvass our human service agencies, and really help determine where the COVID-related needs are in the community at this point in time. Also getting feedback from internal from the organization, you know, talking about infrastructure and things like that. So I'd like to just make one small amendment. I'd like this to be an advisory ARPA Fund Steering Committee to the Board of Selectmen, so that it can fall under our advisory committee. You know, they perform their role for a year, and that way we aren't necessarily limited into who can participate on it. It still has to follow minority representation rules, but you could take somebody who's on another board or commission and they could serve on this too. So I am looking for your thoughts about what I'm recommending here in terms of the makeup.
It's fine.
I think it's great.
That's good.
My only comment was under item number 1, identifying the town, comma, resident and business center, which you have 3 different
Yes.
groups you're looking
Yep.
at. Okay, I think that's what you meant.
Okay. The one thing that I realize that we don't have sort of a ready group to draw from, but I think there's going to be enough people on this committee that if we give them the importance of the sensitivity to human service related needs, you know, we don't have a committee in the RTM, for example, that's related to human service. We have a human service commission. I didn't think we should necessarily be putting staff on here, but staff certainly will be ex officio and advisory to this committee. But I do want to make sure that we are giving due consideration to the human service needs across our community.
I guess I would wonder, in that vein, would you also have, you know, our emergency services director be an ex officio, or a director of health be ex officios, like?
Yes, all
Yeah.
staff can be ex officio.
Okay, got it.
And maybe we can add that here explicitly.
Do you have specific staff or?
I think those are the ones I was thinking of. I just was thinking of, you know, if this is to address the negative impacts of the COVID public health emergency, they may have more knowledge of things that have affected our residents than some of us.
Okay, I'm going to say,
In the
that-
public works director?
Yeah, that's a
I'm
great
going to say the town administrator, the finance director, the director of health, the human service director, the emergency management director, and the director of public works should all be ex officio.
Makes sense.
Okay. If there are no other suggested changes, then I would like to entertain a motion to approve the construct of the Advisory ARPA Fund Steering Committee.
So moved?
Skip moves, seconded by Monica. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Great. And we can move forward to fill these spots. Thank you very much. All right, I think we're on to transfers, right? Okay. We have a bunch. So we will start with Police Department, transfer of $5,702 from personal protective gear to uniforms and equipment, and this is for new handcuffs. I appreciate that in the explanation, they explained that handcuffing someone is considered a use of force. So it would make sense to have the best equipment possible. So if there's no questions, I will entertain a motion to approve this transfer.
So moved.
Sarah moves,
Second.
Kip seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. All right, Parks and Recreation. We have a transfer of $9,983 from seasonal and temporary recreation facility maintenance, overtime salary, beach and court, and training services to overtime salary, recreation facility and maintenance. We have a write-up here, Pam, but you were so nice to stay so late. Do you want to make a comment about this?
I think it pretty much speaks for
Okay,
itself.
great.
This is a fiscal year 21.
The only 22 was the first one.
Right.
The rest are all fiscal.
That's what I thought, just want to make sure.
Okay. Entertain a motion to approve this transfer?
So moved.
Oh, Kip got it first, Monica. Monica seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, Public Works, transfer of $28,517 from overtime salary to motorized equipment. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
Overtime during the winter months was below predicted levels, so needed some money for repairs on large equipment. Motion to approve?
Move.
Monica moves, Sarah seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Public Works again, $7,109 from ice control material to motor fuel and lubricants. Description reads for itself. Motion to approve?
Could I just ask one question?
Sure, yeah.
In general?
Yep.
The ice control account is gonna come up in a couple of more transfers too.
Yep.
And if I add them up, it totals to about $26,000. So does that, so this is a 21 fiscal year these transfers end up depleting that account?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And if you, as Ed noted, they filled the salt dome.
Yeah,
So
no.
we bought as much as we could to be prepared for next year.
No, I got it, it just was curious, because I was surprised that there would be that much funds left in that account. All
So,
right.
salt
Okay.
not used.
Move.
Not in my house.
Okay, Monica moves the $7,109 transfer.
Second.
Sarah seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Public Works, ice control, $5,923 transfer from ice control material to heating fuel.
Thank God they got this thing solved now.
So moved.
David moves, may I have a second?
Second.
Kip seconds. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, thank you. Public Works, $35,232 from tree maintenance to solid waste disposal. Increase in solid waste charges during COVID.
And just to make sure, it said that the general maintenance is minimal, but this doesn't put us behind the 8 ball in any way.
No.
Correct. Motion to approve? Sarah moves, may I have a second?
Second.
Okay, David seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And Public Works, transfer of $25,834 from ice control, software maintenance, facility maintenance and repair to electricity. This is, the 701 Boston Post Road is back using the building.
They were out during the construction of the Royal.
Yep.
Yep.
But I bet most of it's town hall, isn't it?
Yep, town hall, airflow.
Verify.
Motion to approve, David moves. May I have a second? Sarah seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we have regular meeting minutes of July 27th.
And I was told I failed to put the vote in on
Item 9.
item 9. I need to add the vote.
That was Kip moved, Sarah seconded, and 5 members in favor. Are there any other corrections or additions to the July 27th minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve as amended. Kip
Second.
moves, Sarah seconds. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, agenda review. We're having Craig and Ed at our next meeting, Kate?
No, we haven't settled on a date yet. Well, originally you had asked for Craig, Jeremy, and Ed.
Yep, that would be
And trying to
great.
get the three of them to, where they're all available on the same date has been a little bit of a challenge. Right now, we're going to try for the second meeting in September,
Oh, jeez.
unless you want to drop one of them off the list.
It's a really important discussion. I think they should all be present.
Right, agree.
So-
And this discussion is for flooding in
Yes, and
all the
sewer.
various locations that
Correct,
happens.
yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so,
I think it'd be good to have them all together, so let's talk about it, figure out if there are areas that we need to focus on first, and projects that need to be considered, and the best ways to have them all together.
yep,
Agree.
yep. It occurred to me as Victoria was talking about the BRIC grant program, wondering if there's any sewer hardening that we could do with a FEMA BRIC grant.
I don't know much about the BRIC program. I do know that sewer infrastructure is eligible under ARPA.
Okay,
That would be great,
yep,
yeah, that'd be very good.
okay. Other agenda review items.
The flooding is on top of my list, so that would be
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Nope, that's it.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Sarah moves, Mary seconds. David seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Great. Thanks, everybody. That was a big, important meeting. Appreciate your time.
Kip, don't worry.